Every day, it was the same sight, an old man sitting alone in Central Park, people scurrying around him. Children saw him as the weird old man, while adults completely ignored him. But when Marcus approached him that day, he would discover that this ordinary old man was, in fact, the greatest chess legend. Marcus Thompson was a sophomore at Columbia University. The 19-year-old was studying psychology and walked through Central Park every morning on his way to campus. On that cold October morning, as he followed his usual route, something caught his eye. The old man, sitting on an old wooden bench in the shade of the sycamore trees near the park's 72nd Street entrance, was standing, as usual, at his chessboard. Marcus had seen him for months but had never approached. The atmosphere around him was always unsettling. Harold Bennett appeared to be in his early 70s. His gray hair was unkempt, his face wrinkled. He wore a worn brown jacket and worn leather shoes. An old bag sat beside him, from which he occasionally fished out crumbs and gave them to the birds. Joggers passing through the park glanced sideways at him, and some changed their ways. Mothers shook their children's hands and moved away, whispering, "That guy's a little weird. Don't go near him." Even the park security guards eyed him suspiciously. Marcus had been playing chess since high school. He was a team captain at school and occasionally competed in tournaments at university. He was intrigued by the chessboard in front of Harold every day. The man always seemed to be playing alone, sometimes talking to himself. That day, Marcus wasn't in a rush to go to university. His first lesson was in the afternoon, and something was drawing him towards Harold. Perhaps it was his loneliness, or perhaps it was simply curiosity. "Hello," Marcus said, approaching cautiously. "Do you play chess?" Harold looked up. At first, he looked surprised, as if no one had spoken to him in a long time. His blue eyes flashed with a moment of unease, then a hopeful gleam. When he spoke, his voice was slightly trembling but warm. "Of course, son. I'd be delighted. No one's wanted to play in a long time." There was a childlike joy in his voice. Marcus sat down across from him on the bench. The chessboard was old but looked of fine quality. The pieces were handcrafted wood, and despite years of use, they still gleamed beautifully. The board had small nicks around the edges, indicating years of loving use. "I'm Marcus," the young man said, extending his hand. "Harold," the older man said, shaking it. His handshake was firm, reminiscent of the old days. "Harold Bennett. I love living here. Are you from Columbia?" Marcus was surprised. "Yeah, how did you know?" "Logo," Harold said, smiling, pointing to Marcus's sweatshirt. "I used to live around there too. Nice places." In the first moves, Marcus was quite confident. He assumed Harold would be slow and perhaps forgetful due to his age. He imagined telling his chess club friends, "I played with a sweet old man in the park." But within the first 10 minutes, he realized that wasn't the case at all. Harold's opening was perfect. He played the Queen's Gambit flawlessly, calculating each move minutes in advance. He systematically dismantled Marcus's pawn structure, positioning his knight in such a strategic position that it threatened the young man's king. The most surprising thing was that Harold's hands would sometimes tremble slightly when he held the pieces, but when he concentrated on making a move, the tremors disappeared completely. It was as if chess were transforming him into a different person. "Where did you learn that move?" Marcus asked, after seeing Harold's elegant maneuver with the bishop. The move was so sophisticated that it completely overwhelmed Marcus's defenses. Harold paused for a moment. Uncertainty flashed in his eyes, as if he were trying to remember. He scratched his forehead and assumed a thoughtful expression. "A long time ago, from a friend," he said vaguely. "I can't remember the exact name, but I remember the move." The hands remember. This answer got Marcus thinking. There was something professional about Harold's playing style, it felt familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. It was as if he'd seen these moves before, but where? As the game progressed, Marcus became increasingly challenged. Harold's strategy had become so sophisticated that the young man felt trapped in a labyrinth. His every move was ready, his every attack a premeditated response. This man was truly no amateur. "You play really well," Marcus said, unable to conceal his admiration. "Are you a professional?" A strange expression crossed Harold's face. "Professional?" he repeated. "I used to play. But now." His voice trailed off, and he shook his head. "I'm just trying to remember now." The next day, Marcus led his morning jog toward Harold's bench. The old man was there, but this time he looked very different. More careless, more disorganized. He was trying to arrange the chess pieces, but he kept getting them mixed up. "Mr. Harold, how are you?" Marcus asked, approaching. Harold looked up and stared blankly at Marcus for a moment. "Do I know you?" Marcus's heart sank. "Do you remember when we played chess yesterday?" "Yesterday?" Harold looked at him with a puzzled expression. "Was I here yesterday?" I forget sometimes." There was desperation in his voice. Marcus realized the old man had memory problems, but he decided to sit down anyway. "Shall we play a game?" The same thing happened again when the game began. Harold's hands were shaking, sometimes he'd forget what suit he was playing, but when he touched the pieces, they transformed into something completely different. His moves were flawless again. "How did you remember this opening?" Marcus asked, trying to recognize Harold's sophisticated opening. "Opening?" Harold paused, confused. "What's this?" "I'm just playing what feels right." But then he suddenly began talking to himself. "No, not that move. Boris wouldn't do that. He always protected the queen first." Then he stopped and looked at Marcus. "I'm sorry, sometimes I hear voices. Old voices." "Who was Boris?" Marcus asked. Harold's face tightened. "I don't know. The name just came to mind. It sounds familiar, but..." He put his hand to his temple. As the game went on, Harold occasionally said strange things. "The great hall was cold," he said. "There were thousands of people, but the silence was terrible. Just the ticking of the clocks." Then he suddenly stopped and stared at Marcus in surprise. Marcus was now becoming seriously curious. This man wasn't just a good chess player. His conversations, his moves, even his unconscious body language suggested a professional background. That evening, after returning to his dorm, Marcus decided to do some research online. He would try to get to know Harold's style of play. Marcus spent the night watching chess videos on YouTube. Old tournament footage, famous players' matches, classic openings. He watched for hours, but couldn't find what he was looking for. The next morning, when he arrived at the park with his laptop, Harold was sitting on the bench again, but this time, there was no chessboard. He was just sitting there, drawing something in the air with his hands. "Mr. Harold, where's your chessboard?" "Marcus." Harold's face lit up. At least he remembered it. "My board. I left it somewhere, but where?" He looked around. "Everything's blurry." Marcus searched the area and found the board near the dumpster. Someone must have thrown it, or Harold had dropped it. He brought it back and placed it in front of the old man. "I found it. Are you ready to play?" While he was playing, Marcus opened his laptop and began searching YouTube more systematically. 1980s chess championships, famous chess players, world champions. Finally, he found the final match of the 1987 World Chess Championship. The video was titled "Harold Bennett Defeats Kasparov, 1987 World Championship." Marcus pressed play, his heart pounding. On the screen, a young man was performing in 1987. He was about 25 or 30 years old, dark-haired, and had a determined gaze. The camera bore the same blue eyes, the same hand gestures, the same thoughtful frown as the older man sitting before him now. "Mr. Harold," Marcus said, trying to control his voice. "I want to show you something." He turned the laptop. Harold looked at the screen. At first, he didn't respond, just watched intently. As the video progressed, his eyes widened. This is me," Harold said, his voice shaky. I was that young man. But how? When? 1987, Marcus said softly. "You are Harold Bennett. World chess champion." Harold's eyes began to well up. His hands were shaking as he watched the young man on the screen. "Kasparov," he whispered. "I played with Garry Kasparov. And I won." Marcus fast-forwarded the video, showing the moment of victory. Young Harold rose to his feet, the crowd applauding wildly. "Yes," Marcus said. "You won. You became world champions." Harold began to cry silently. I had forgotten all about it. But now I remember. The hands remember, the heart remembers. From that day on, everything began to change. Marcus began meeting with Harold every day. They showed him more videos, found old photos online. Each discovery brought back a piece of Harold's memory. "I was only 28 in 1987, Harold said one day, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Everyone thought Kasparov would win. He was the greatest genius of his time. But I had developed a different strategy. I trained for months." Harold began to recount that famous match to Marcus, step by step. He remembered every move, every moment of the 6-hour match. Kasparov's stunned face, the silence of the arena, the euphoria of victory. "So what happened next?" Marcus asked. "Why are you sitting here all alone?" Harold's face crumpled. "The championship lasted only a year. I played Kasparov again in 1988 and lost. But that wasn't the problem. It was this illness." He pointed to his head. "Alzheimer's. It started in my 50s. Very early." "You have family? Your friends?" "I have my son, David," Harold said bitterly. "But he doesn't recognize me anymore. When the doctors diagnosed me with dementia, David put me in a special care home. He said I'd be safe. But His voice broke. "I felt like I was in a cage. I escaped. 3 months ago." Marcus was shocked. "Where do you live?" "Sometimes in a shelter, sometimes in a park. It's easier in the summer, but winter is approaching." Harold shrugged. "But I'm free here. Here, I'm Harold Bennett, not sick." "What about money? Championship trophies, savings?" Harold smiled proudly. "I donated it all to charity years ago. Money was never important. It was the game, the mental challenge, the beauty." Marcus sank into deep thought. One of the world's greatest chess champions lived homeless in the park, and everyone thought he was a weird old man. "Mr. Harold," Marcus said firmly. "I need to tell your story to people. People need to know." Harold hesitated. "No one will care. I'm not that man anymore." "You're still that man," Marcus said. "Your memory may be blurry, but your spirit, your talent, is the same. People need to see that." That evening, Marcus shared Harold's story on his social media accounts. He uploaded videos he'd taken in the park, showing the old man's magnificent moves, with the caption, "Forgotten World Champion Living in Central Park." The video was first shared by a few friends, then spread to chess groups. Within hours, it had received thousands of views. Comments poured in. "Is this real? I remember Harold Bennett. How did we lose this guy? We need to help him." The next morning, when Marcus arrived at the park, a small crowd had gathered around Harold. Chess fans, journalists, curious citizens. Harold was stunned but happy. A reporter from the New York Times wanted to interview him. A crew from CBS News arrived. But most importantly, Harold's son, David, arrived. A man in his 40s, wearing business suits, came running across the park. His eyes were filled with tears. "Dad," he shouted. "Dad, I found you." Harold looked up. For a moment, he didn't recognize him, then his face lit up. "David? My son, David?" "Yes, Dad, it's me." David knelt and hugged his father. "I thought I'd lost you. I've been looking for you for 3 months. Why did you run away?" "It was like a cage," Harold said softly. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be here." David nodded through tears. "I understand, Dad. I understand now. I won't force you." In response to media interest, the park management set aside a special chess corner for Harold. The mayor came and handed over the keys. He was declared honorary chess master of Central Park. The New York Chess Club offered him membership. His old rivals came to visit. Even Kasparov sent a video message. Harold Bennett was one of the most gifted chess players in history. It's wonderful to see him again. But Harold's favorite moments were still when he played with Marcus. "Thank you, Marcus," Harold said one afternoon. "You reminded me of myself. You reminded me of my worth." "No, Mr. Harold," Marcus said. "You taught me what truly matters. Heart, not appearance. Passion, not age. Spirit, not status." Harold smiled and made a move. "Checkmate," he said. Marcus looked at the board and laughed. He had lost again. But he didn't care anymore. What he had won was far more valuable. David started seeing his father daily. He didn't force Harold back into the institution. Instead, he rented a small apartment near the park. Harold could stay home whenever he wanted, and he could go to the park whenever he wanted. The park was completely different now. Harold was always surrounded by chess enthusiasts. The children called him Grandpa Champion. But he was still the same humble person. A year later, Marcus graduated. He earned his psychology degree and decided to specialize in elder care. This decision, inspired by Harold, was about not judging people by their appearances and discovering the value in everyone. Harold was there on graduation day. His memory was still dim, but he never forgot Marcus. "You saved my life," Harold said. "No," Marcus said. "You gave meaning to my life." And from that day on, they both knew that true friendship lives not in age, status, or appearance, but in the heart.